Palestinians in southern Gaza are reeling from an overnight Israeli military operation. Israeli forces drop bombs on targets in the city of Rafah, where nearly 1 million Palestinians are taking refuge. At the same time, special operations forces raided a building in that city, rescuing 2 hostages. These scenes were captured a few hours later at a hospital near Tel Aviv. 2 men reunited with their loved ones after months in captivity. These were the scenes in Rafah this morning. 2 mosques were reportedly targeted in the operation, and the Hamas-run health ministry says at least 67 people were killed in the airstrikes. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has signaled a broader ground operation in Rafah is coming. Randa Slim is a senior fellow and director of the Conflict Resolution and Track 2 Dialogues program at the Middle East Institute. Jon Allen is a former Canadian ambassador to Israel. He's now a senior fellow at the University of Toronto's Munk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy. It's good to see you both again. Thanks for coming back so soon.
Hi, David.
Good to be with you.
Randa, your thoughts on this Israeli military operation in Rafah overnight and the promise of potentially more to come?
Well, I mean, I hate to imagine this more to come, because we're dealing with a situation of 1.4 million people who are squeezed into a 2.4 square mile area. The same area, Rafah, used to host 270,000 Palestinians. Now it's 1.4 million. They have nowhere else to go. Israel keeps talking about an evacuation plan. I don't know where to take them. You know, if you take them to the north of Rafah, there are still combat going on. If you take them, you know, I mean, and then the border with Egypt has refused any kind of displacement of, you know, this 1.4 million across the border into the Sinai. And you cannot do this kind of evacuation without international help, you know, in terms of relocation. And at the same time that Israel wants the UNRWA, the agency that takes care of Palestinian refugees, wants the agency disbanded. So who's going to work with Israel if Israel really has a relocation plan, which so far it doesn't seem it has a relocation plan.
So, Jon, Israel was supposed to be entering a new phase of this war, more targeted, more advance notice, more warnings, geolocated, you know, safe zones within these areas. But, you know, we're hearing from the health authority, which Hamas controls because it's inside Gaza. They're saying 67 Palestinians, you know, were killed in the bombardment last night. And this has been backed up by people who work in the hospitals. I mean, are the tactics changing here on Israel's part?
Well, it's hard to know whether this effort to release the hostages is related to the 67 deaths. I think it is. They decided, I think, probably to do some bombing and artillery in order to create noise that would then allow them to go into this building and take the hostages. But of course, if they're going to kill 67 people every time hostages are taken, then we've got a massive humanitarian problem on our hands. Yes, the Biden administration and others have been demanding that a more targeted approach be had. But on the other hand, Bibi has said that he wants a plan for moving in a big way. He thinks he's got the Hamas leaders cornered and the hostages in this small area. But it will be a humanitarian disaster if they go in with the kind of artillery and bombing that they have in the past. I tend to doubt that they're going to do that, but with that many people there, as Randa says, unless they get them out of there, there's going to be many, many lives lost.
So, Randa, what do you make of Netanyahu's decision here, that if they are truly going to press into that area? We saw President Biden today saying there needs to be a credible plan to protect civilians, remove civilians. You know, King Abdullah of Jordan was with him. He's going to be in Canada on Wednesday saying much the same thing. But yet it seems, despite the pushback from allies and others, that Netanyahu is pretty determined to do this.
Yes, and the United States and the American president has been, you know, saying the right words in terms of pushing Netanyahu, but they haven't really conditioned any of their support to Israel on his changing his behavior and making different decisions that are in line with their requests. I mean, yes, he said a few days ago that what's happening, but the Israeli operation is over the top, but what has he done in terms of action? Has he conditioned arms transfer from the United States to Israel, for example, on Israel having this kind of evacuation plan? So, I mean, we have seen for the last 4 months, the United States keeps saying, yes, we want Israel to do something, but they are not willing to put any kind of conditions on the kind of support they have so far provided Israel. And so how much they can do, I don't know, and whether they can prevent this attack once Netanyahu has decided to do it. And that, in fact, it puts into question all their other plans about the region. So if they cannot stop an attack in Rafah, who's going to put any stock in their plans to have regional normalization, integration, two-state solution implemented? So unless they can do that in the short term, I think all their plans for the long term are going to be put into question.
So Jon, what is your read on the short and the medium term? Like, is there a breaking point for Joe Biden with Benjamin Netanyahu? You look at some of the prognostications on how this could play out. For example, in the presidential election, Michigan has a significant Muslim population. Some of these important battleground states where, Donald Trump came close last time could potentially be in play. But the White House, the Pentagon, the national security spokespeople, they all keep saying they want to see Israel do something different. And it doesn't seem like Israel does what they want, yet the support continues. Where do you think this goes with the U.S.-Israel relationship?
Well, we've got two huge political issues here. On the one hand, there's no question that Biden is in trouble with Muslims, with Palestinians in Michigan, key state, and with young people. As we talked before, the demographics are not good for him. Those people aren't going to vote for Trump, but they're going to potentially stay home. But on the other hand, in the United States, the Republicans are 100% in favor of Israel. And he's in a bit of a bind because as soon as he even hints at the fact that he's going to stop weapons flow, they'll be all over him. And in Israel, you've got Bibi, who is reading the polls there. And the polls in Israel, unfortunately, say, go in there and get Hamas. We want Hamas eliminated, even though all the experts will tell you that's not realistic. And Bibi himself in his memoirs has said, you can try and wipe out Hamas, but they're going to pop up again because it's an ideology and because there's thousands of them, etc. But Bibi's reading the polls there, and the polls are saying that you've got to go in there and do this. So the only hope I saw was an article in Haaretz today, which said that one option for Bibi is to basically not go ahead with a major Rafah attack, which has been opposed, as we say, by the Brits, by the Germans, by the EU, and by the Americans, and blame it on Bibi. Hold back a bit, not do a massive attack that is going to inflict huge damage, and then blame it on Biden and say, the Americans made us do this, and we have to respect that, et cetera, et cetera. That's a best case scenario, but I don't know whether it's going to happen. He has asked for plans, so we really don't know what it is that his military is going to come up with. But as Randa says, there's nowhere to go east and west. So if they go back up north to Khan Yunis or farther, I mean, you're going back into fighting and devastation. They're living in tents right now without enough food and water, etc.
Yeah, there's land for them to occupy, Randa, but the Gazans and the Palestinians, but there's very few buildings. I mean, more than half the structures, as I understand it, have been destroyed or diminished by what's happened there. But if Randa, as we've talked, the big concern is about this widening out and becoming like a bigger, conflict throughout the region. With we've seen what's happening with the Houthis and with Hezbollah. After the IDF has pushed them all into southern Gaza, to sort of like the Rafah gate, which is where foreign nationals got out. That was the one little bit of safety. If there's now a major ground invasion into there, and based on what we saw last night, the numbers would be catastrophic. How do you think that affects things in the wider region?
Egypt has already threatened to suspend the Camp David Treaty, which, for the whole peacemaking architecture between Israel and the Arab neighbors, the Camp David Treaty is the anchor of that architecture. So if Egypt were to suspend this, and Egypt threatened because if Israel decides in any way to basically face the Egyptian officials with a fait accompli, as you put it, force everybody to come to the gate, and then, basically face the Egyptians saying either they're going to die or you're going to open the gate and let them in. And there will be then pressure on the Egyptian president to let them in. You are facing a humanitarian disasters with fellow Arabs and fellow Muslims. And so if that were to happen, and I think Bibi understands that, I don't know if he appreciates how serious the Egyptians are about this, but they are really very serious. And if that were to happen, then as I said earlier, this whole approach of the Biden administration toward two-state solution, normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia, and the Saudis already said, there will be no normalization until there is a recognition of a Palestinian state on the 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital, and the cessation of hostilities in Gaza, and the withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza. So all of this, we are facing really an inflection point in this conflict, if we can said after more than 27,000 people dead. But as Jon said, the losses are going to be horrific. The scenes we are going to encounter are just going to be horrific, catastrophic, even beyond what we have seen to date. And so I don't know if Bibi wants to go there, but as Jon said, there is a public mood pushing him to go there. And by the way, in terms of the Hamas leadership in being cornered in Rafah, remember, there are tunnels between Rafah and Egypt that are still operating. And so it is very possible that many of these Hamas leaders have already exited Rafah.
Okay, Jon, we got about 30 seconds left. Just what are you watching for next on this from your perch?
Well, I'm waiting for the military plan that Bibi is waiting for, and I'm waiting to see what he's going to decide next. There's not much else we can do. The world is focused on this. He knows that, but it's a question of whether he's listening. It's a question of whether he, as Randa says, realizes just how serious this is. And we just have to hope that in the end, he's going to back off and maybe use that targeted approach and try and go after these leaders, corner them, try and release as many hostages. There is also the hostage negotiations going on.
Yes.
And Burns is back in the region. And it's possible that we could, if we get lucky, if Hamas relaxes a bit on its response, it's possible we could get a pause, which, of course, as we all hope, would lead to a ceasefire. But we don't know.
Okay, always appreciate it when you take the time to join us. Randa Slim and Jon Allen, thank you so much.